Can a 7-times world champion forget how to win from one year to another? Or is it the red car that is turning off the spark of Lewis Hamilton? Toto Wolff has an opinion, but does the entire paddock share it? The pressure on Lewis Hamilton has reached levels that were not seen since their early years in McLaren. His debut with Ferrari has not been the fairy tale that many imagined. Instead, he has been plagued with doubts, uncomfortable comparisons with his partner Charles Leclerc, and a machinery that seems not to live up to his talent. The criticisms have not taken to arrive. Media, analysts, and even ancient detractors have begun to question whether the 7-time champion remains that fearsome pilot that used to turn every opportunity into victory. In this rare and increasingly hostile environment, an unexpected voice has arisen to return some sanity to the debate. That voice is that of Toto Wolff. To understand the dimension of his words, we must remember that Wolff is not simply an ex-chief of Hamilton. It was his mentor, his strategic partner, and, in many ways, one of the architects of the most dominant era in the modern history of Formula One. Wolff and Hamilton shared 12 seasons full of triumphs, records, and an almost telepathic understanding. That today, from Mercedes, the Austrian is pronounced in favor of the British pilot is not just an act of loyalty. It is a declaration of principles, a public defense that seeks to stop the precipitate trial. Wolff was categorical. We still saw that magic during the race to sprint in Shanghai. This statement is not less. It is based on data, on real performance, on a recent performance that evidenced what many have forgotten. Lewis Hamilton, even with a car away from the ideal, can get a magical return when all the factors are aligned. In that sprint, he demonstrated rhythm, aggressiveness, and trust, just what is required to an elite pilot. Wolff's argument does not stay in the anecdotal. He continues, "It's not that suddenly you lose that magic from one race to another. I am convinced that he still has it." With these words, Wolff disassembles the myth that a pilot gets older and loses talent in an abrupt way. What changes, many times, are the circumstances. But he doesn't stay there. It provides an explanation that few have stopped to consider. He was 12 years old and got used completely to our way of working. This point is crucial. Hamilton's success in Mercedes was not only the result of his skill at the wheel, but of a structure that knew in detail. Engineers who understood their needs, simulation systems adjusted to his style, work methodologies that he himself helped to mold. Upon reaching Ferrari, all that disappears. He meets a different culture, with internal dynamics that are alien to him, and with a car that does not respond to his stimuli with the surgical precision of the Mercedes that he drove for more than a decade. In addition, you must deal with a new internal rival, Charles Leclerc. Wolff mentions it without tapujos, describing him as one of the strongest pilots of the grill. This phrase contains a veiled recognition to the additional challenge that Hamilton faces. Leclerc not only knows Ferrari's environment thoroughly, but has a tactical advantage that cannot be underestimated. Years of prior adaptation, established relationships within the team, and a proven ability to maximize a car that he helped develop. Together, Wolff's words are not a simple friendly defense. They are a technical and human analysis of the complexity of changing the team after more than a decade. A reminder that Formula One is not only speed and reflexes, but a high-performance discipline where adaptation, synergy with the equipment, and the understanding of the car are as decisive as pure talent. Wolff's public intervention, therefore, should not be taken lightly. It is a message aimed at those who forget that Hamilton does not need to prove anything. That magic does not disappear. It simply needs the right environment to manifest. And if someone knows how that environment is built, it is precisely who for years led the most successful team in the hybrid era. To understand why Lewis Hamilton has not been able to show his best version in Ferrari, it is essential to speak of the true silent protagonist of this story, the SF25. This car, which should be the key piece of a new era in Maranello, has become a structural obstacle that limits the performance not only of Hamilton, but also of his partner Charles Leclerc. Frustration does not lie in the results, but in the inability to exploit the potential that is presumed to their pilots. From the seasonal start, the Ferrari SF25 has shown a series of technical limitations that cannot be overlooked. One of the most critical is his poor behavior in classification. Despite having two of the fastest pilots on the grill, the car has had problems putting tires in optimal temperature, especially in Q3 sessions. This means that, in the turns where absolute precision and performance are most needed, the car is not delivering the necessary grip. Fred Vasseur summarized it clearly after the Miami GP. If the qualification is not dominated, the weekend is lost since Saturday. In such a tight championship, going out in the fourth row is to start the race at tactical disadvantage. In addition, the SF25 has remarkable instability in slow curves and in traction at the exit of average curves, especially when the car has fuel load. This forces pilots to compensate with pilot adjustments, which reduces their maneuvering margin and limits their ability to attack on the track. Hamilton, accustomed to a car that responded with surgical exactness in Mercedes, must now work with a car that does not offer the trust or predictability that a pilot of his style needs. He has tried to adapt, even modifying his way of braking and his curve entry technique, approaching Leclerc's style, but this has only served to show how far the car is in his competitive comfort zone. This mismatch between car and pilot has generated a loss of silent time in each stint. In Australia, for example, Hamilton was forced to copy the most aggressive braking technique of Leclerc to maintain a minimal speed in curve. That kind of adaptation, far from being a solution, is an alarm signal. Hamilton is driving against nature, far from his style, which prevents him from maximizing his performance. In that same weekend, Ferrari also made a strategic error by leaving him too much time on the track with rain tires when there was already clear advantage for change. Result: he lost key positions, stuck in traffic, and his career was mortgaged. But it is not just a matter of specific errors. There is a structural reality behind the SF25. The aerodynamics of the car has not evolved to the rhythm of McLaren or Mercedes. Under cold track conditions, the car is especially difficult to calibrate. It does not respond well to balance changes during the race, and the team has internally recognized that they have not yet found a stable operational window for different types of compounds. This translates into a car sensitive to external and extremely dependent conditions of a millimeter tuning. If something gets out of control, the performance is bitten. All this is added the psychological context. Hamilton is not a pilot who blames the car easily. But his body language, his radio messages, and his recent statements suggest that there is a contained frustration. He knows that talent is there, but he also knows that without a car up to height, that talent is buried under layers of technical commitment. Even so, the most worrying thing is that Ferrari seems to have no immediate answers. Updates for Emilia Romagna were promised, but the margin of improvement is limited if the base platform is unstable. This third act reveals an awkward truth. The problem is not Hamilton. The problem is that, for the moment, Ferrari has failed to give him a competitive car. And in Formula 1, for more talent you have, if your work tool is unbalanced, you are condemned to fight uphill. The open question is whether the team can reverse the situation on time, or if we will see how Hamilton's passage through Ferrari becomes a waste wasted because of a car that was never up to the challenge. With everything analyzed to this point, it is clear that Lewis Hamilton has not lost his magic. What has lost, at least for now, is the environment that made it invincible. Formula 1 is a relentless sport where individual talent, by itself, does not guarantee success. A perfect gear is needed: car, equipment, strategy, trust, and stability. When any of these elements fails, even the best pilot of his generation may seem human. And that is what Hamilton is living in Ferrari. Toto Wolff expressed it precisely. It is not a drop in its level, but a forced transition to an ecosystem that has not been tailored. A place where each procedure, each interaction, each technical adjustment is alien. After 12 years building an identity in Mercedes, now it must be reinvented from scratch in a team with a deeply different culture. And that does not happen overnight. It is not a matter of days, not even for weeks. It is a process that takes time, that demands patience, and above all, that needs partial results that feed the pilot's morale. The problem, unfortunately, is that the calendar of Formula 1 does not expect anyone. Every weekend it represents a public evaluation, a new opportunity to judge without context. And in that constant pressure cycle, it is easy to forget that Hamilton's greatness was not erased by changing uniform. What he needs is not a criticism, but a competitive platform that allows him to be the Sunday predator. He demonstrated it in Shanghai. He had already hinted at the preseason, and reaffirmed him in his duel with Verstappen in the sprint classification. What was seen there was not a finished pilot, but one that, as soon as an array of technical coherence glimpses, brings out the best version of himself. The GP of Emilia Romagna, which is coming, will be another turning point. Ferrari has promised a substantial update for that weekend, and it will be the perfect opportunity to measure if they are really willing to give Hamilton a car with which you can compete from U to U with McLaren, Red Bull, or Mercedes. It is not just a matter of points in the championship, it is a matter of direction. Or Ferrari responds now, or runs the risk of losing what could have been a golden stage with one of the most talented pilots in the modern history of motoring. At this point in his career, Hamilton no longer needs to demonstrate anything. His 7 titles, his victories, his poles, his comeback have consolidated him as a legend. But what does need is that the current narrative does not bury what it can still offer. Because when a champion of his caliber enters fighting mode, when he feels that he has to shut up mouths, he becomes an uncontrollable force. History has shown that underestimating Lewis Hamilton is a mistake that always ends up expensive. Ferrari has the cards. Time, on the other hand, is the one who does not forgive. And perhaps that is the most fascinating of this new stage, that there is still a story to write. Because if Hamilton manages to overcome this adversity, he will not only silence his critics, but will seal one of the most epic returns we have seen in the history of this sport. And that, even for those who are not fans, would be simply unforgettable.